to the show.
I just want to let y'all know that they knew I was coming back this week, so they went ahead and invested some hard-earned money into some good equipment. So now y'all can hear my voice at 1080p
in all its richness.
4K at 60 frames per second. Yeah.
Well, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Infusion Breakdown Show. It's your boy Joshua Freeman. To my left, I got Mr. Brian Carey. Of course, we got the return of Mr. Desmond Tillman. Finally got his contract.
Lockup is over.
I just want to let y'all know that this podcast is sponsored by Bubble Coats and Timberlands. If you can't tell by the New York hat.
But the topic I want to get into today, basically, I know you guys heard about the recent shootings in El Paso, Texas, and Daytona, Ohio, right?
Dayton, bro.
Dayton.
You better put some respect on that.
I don't know what those
Daytona is Florida.
Oh, okay, that's what. You said what? But, yeah, Dayton, Ohio. And people have been talking about that video games are the reason because of these mass shootings. Now they're starting to talk about the video games being bad for kids now. So do you guys believe that video games are the cause of these mass shootings? What do you guys think?
All right, let's get into it. I don't think it's anything new, because this is not a new discussion or a new claim either. Because as far as back as Columbine, they've been saying that video games will partially be blamed. And so I think that's a very knee-jerk reaction, and it's completely inaccurate. So I just jotted in a few quick statistics, and that's just comparative numbers to see what was going on. So I looked at the revenue of the video game industry in several different countries. So the United States, for example, we have $25,426 million of revenue from the video game industry. This was in 2017.
And did you say 25,400 and?
Yeah. Million. Like the graph that's the unit, and it was in millions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Excuse me, it was 2019. And then, for example, China had 32,536 million. And just all these numbers. And then I looked at the size of the country as well and compared the two. And by far, the United States, even though we do have a high number of like video game revenue, so that equates a lot of people in the United States playing video games, but it's nowhere near as high as per se Japan, which is a smaller country. And the math worked out, they have roughly almost twice as profitable, the revenue. So they have more video game players. But then I looked at, okay, how many mass shootings do they have? Japan. And then I also saw like one big difference is the acquisition of firearms in the country. Like in Japan, like you lived in Japan. Could you tell us about that? I know it's extremely difficult. Like, civilians really can't own guns.
So as far as like actually owning and carrying weapons, I can't attest to that, because I know in Japan like it's very easy to get like BB guns and stuff like that. So there is a part of the culture that does like push like the whole BB gun aspect. But as far as like real guns that, you know, essentially either kill or protect people, it's very hard to get those. And then in addition to that, I mean, you know, Japan's like quality standards as far as like quality of life and then morality and this how their system of, you know, really everything is structured is like night and day difference between the US. So it's kind of to be expected. But I will say though that like although Japan has like really low murder rates, they have like high suicide rates as well. So, you know, you kind of got to think like there's also like there got to be a give somewhere in some category, unfortunately. So
that's the next point. I actually looked into like mental illness, because that's another scapegoat they like to say. So it's like mental illness is not a unique phenomenon in the United States. We're not the only people that experience this. Like, for example, I just looked at depression. United States, we have a 4.81% of depression in 2016. Sweden had 4.5, Canada had 3.97, Finland 4.83, and Australia 4.66. And we have way more mass shootings. So it's not a depression, it's not a mental health issue either, I feel like. Like, what's the factor that is different?
Go on.
I'm not going to agree 100% with that one, because I think that if you're going to bring up the mental illness part and then try and say that it's not, I think you got to factor in though that like it's 10 times easier to access firearms and just about any weaponry in the United States than it is like in Europe or any other
That's exactly
country.
what I'm getting at.
So you're saying that, but you're saying it's not related though.
No, I'm saying if you were to remove, let's say the people still had the illness, right? But it was harder for them to get the firearms. Would there be these mass shootings and gun violence?
I think you're defeating your own argument.
No.
You're saying that if mental illness stays the same and they remove firearms, are there going to be the same amount of mass shootings?
Like in countries that have equal or similar rates of mental illness, which I just listed off a few of them.
Yeah.
Similar numbers, but the difference is like the amount of firearms they own per person in that country is lower. They have lower shootings. That's the data that I found. How does that defeat my argument?
Because you're saying that it. Do you understand?
I think I understand what you're talking about. I'm not.
So my thing, what my disagreement is that it's a known fact that U.S. glorizes like firearms and this, that, and the third.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, if you remove firearms, it's going to decrease the amount of mass shootings. Mm-hmm. But if you increase firearms in those small countries, then you're going to see a rise in mass shootings there as well.
So I'm trying to point at I'm trying to identify what's different.
Access to weapons.
Okay, that's what I'm getting at. So
you're trying, but I think it's a two-sided thing that it could be mental illness and access to weapons, and then mental illness versus no access to weapons.
Okay, yeah, that's what. Yeah.
But these are developed countries, though.
Yeah, they can be developed countries and not like. I mean, what is it? New Zealand's a developed country, but they don't. Japan's a developed country.
So I mean, just look at. So I was looking at the percentage of how many people own firearms in the country, and so in the United States there are 120.5 firearms per 100 people.
So literally everybody and then some.
Well, you got to think about it. This is the entire population as of what year was it? 2018. And so you got to think about children and people are underage. So they're calculating the population. People who don't even have firearms, so there are quite possibly, people with 13, 15, like enough for a militia actually. Like it's an oversaturation of guns, I feel like.
Yeah. I think the other difference you're missing is there's of course mental illness in like other countries and everything like that, but I feel the United States doesn't take care of its people the same as somebody like a country in Denmark or something like that. Like the doctors in Denmark, they don't take care of them. Mental illnesses the same way, and then even other things like as far as healthcare wise, they don't take care of it the same way. So that's another reason why it's different, other than the access to the firearms. I want to say that also. So.
But directly correlating to that, if it's more challenging for you to acquire firearms, like they do mental health screenings and more in-depth background checks, and it's more regulated, you would see a decline in the people with these conditions accessing firearms, at least on the forefront, at least on the front of my mind. I feel like.
I don't think so, because then I think you're also expecting people to seek help at the same time. Like people can lie and still get access to firearms, and then you also have to look at that getting like as much as like mature adults push the concept of therapy and like fixing yourself before you bring other children into the world, or fixing yourself before you like try and find a partner. You also have to look at like the age group in which these, what are words I want to use? The people who are committing these crimes are like, it's all like young 20s. Am I not mistaken? Like even
21 is
even the dude that
between 20 and 25.
Yeah, even the dude that the Charlottesville dude that ran his car through the people. I mean, he was in college at the time, so if you have to think about like in that time frame, going to therapy and seeking helpness is almost like a weakness, and you do more damage to yourself by looking at it that way, because it's only going to get worse as the time of neglect increases. So that's why I think that
So you think his hatred is based off of his mental depression or something?
Yeah, it's very easy to tie it to it.
Okay. I was saying he can't just hate because
I think
he could be just crazy. I mean, he doesn't have to be. He doesn't have a mental
crazy is like being psychotic is still a mental illness.
Okay, I knew
I'm not trying to undermine the importance of like mental health conditions either, because for example, like the conditions of the brain are very complex, and things that outside your control can affect your behavior. For example, like a brain tumor. There was a guy who he had these murderous tendencies, and then he was in jail for attempted murder, and then they found out that he actually had a tumor in his brain, and they removed the tumor, and he started behaving normally. So that was indicative of something, so an external condition that he had no control over that was affecting his behavior. I understand stuff like that does happen, but if you're looking across the board, all these other countries have access to video games as well, and just to be as foolish as to just say that they could be responsible for this, for the rise of mass shootings or gun violence, I feel like that's a gross oversimplification. They're not looking at all the other factors, and like mental health, that'd be a more viable option to say like it's not being treated as well. But even then, I would say that in itself wouldn't cause gun violence.
Yeah, I said it's not just that. It's that with the access to the guns. That's what I'm talking about too.
I don't know though, man. I think the easiest way to correlate the two is to look at it from black and white, literally. Mm-hmm. And I think if you like look at, and I think we had this conversation before, as like, I think we had this, not as in depth as I'm about to go, but we had to talk about, does everybody deserve happiness? Mm-hmm. And what I mean by black and white, I literally mean it as racially. Like if you look at people that are in the hood, they're killing people that look just like them. That's like a hatred thing. That's something that is ingrained in their head, that is almost such as a mental illness based off of the environment that they're in. They've learned to essentially hate themselves because they're trying to kill somebody essentially that looks just like them. Like you're not looking to kill somebody that, you know, is walking by in a three-piece suit. You're essentially admiring that person. You're not trying to kill somebody that's, you know, white.
Well,
I mean, it happens.
I'm saying
it's happened, but my exact reference is like gang violence.
So you're speaking about gang violence, so in terms of homicides and stuff like that. People kill people people commit crimes against people who are in their area. So if you live in let's say the hood, if you live in a suburb, you're going to commit crimes. Like you're not going to drive. Most people aren't going to drive.
And I get that.
A bunch of miles, like 3 hours away to commit a crime.
I get that, but what I'm saying, like what I'm bringing it back in is that like survivalist mind state, to where like mentally, you're not looking at the world through a clear lens. You're looking at it through years of neglect. You've learned your allegiance from being with your brothers and sisters that are in the same environment as you, and you've learned to essentially hate what you have become, and you have like allegiance based off of, you know, brotherhood or whatever, but it's only limited to just that section. And there's people in another section with the same, you know, disabilities and the same views that you have, but for whatever reason you hate each other. Mm-hmm. So what I'm saying is that like the same things that affect like white people, that affect black people, they're just different, if that makes sense. Like the white people that are committing, you know, mass shootings, you know, yeah, they hate somebody because of being a different color. That's the history of white people. But, you know, it's more or less how they grew up in the aspect. Like, I don't see a lot of these people that are committing crimes coming from, you know, rich households or like parents that are there 100%. Like, you know, we see like, oh, well, they're, you know, in a Dallas suburb, you know, canvassing the home looking for ideas. But just because you live in the suburbs don't mean that everything is good. Just because you live in the suburbs don't mean you have two parents that actually give a fuck about you. So I like not to defend the situations or try and compare them at all, but I'm just saying that it happens on both ends. It's just that, you know, it's viewed as a hate crime, and rightfully so, because it's a, you know, a specifically targeted race. But then I'm also saying that, you know, blacks and whites alike target each other within their race because of kind of like the same construct in their mind. Like, you know, you think to hate another race because of the color they are, because of their beliefs, but then you also think to hate somebody that looks just like you because of whatever reason it might be. Because you don't own the block, you don't own the territory. Like, if the bank want to come in and kick everybody out, the bank will do that. If city council want to come in and renovate everything and make it into a middle class neighborhood, they can do that. So you don't really own it. That's like almost along the lines of, I'm not gonna say mental illness, but like false reality.
It's tribalism.
Exactly.
It's an extension of, so back when we did our what's the greatest force that divides us and brings us together episode, how I spoke about out-group homogeneity. Yeah. So when you have a group, anybody, it's easy for you to say that anyone else outside of that group and to lump them together into one group. This is like, you're either with us or against us. And that's the same principle you just illustrated with like the community, like your block, your neighborhood, or your race, your demographic, or anything like that.
You don't believe that
I'm not defending.
Oh, I'm not saying.
Hey, I'm not defending it at all. Like I I sympathize 100% and I empathize as well, because I couldn't imagine, you know, my parents or my sister or my son or my girl being, you know, murdered senselessly because you feel like they're taking your job or you feel like they don't belong in the country. Like that's.
But do you feel that sometimes you don't feel that society is not taking it too seriously as far as mental illness, but putting it on label on everything without actually assessing the actual whole issue?
Like, you think it's oversaturated almost?
Could be. As far as
I don't think
like,
it is. It could be. I think it is.
What labels are we talking about?
Like mental illness.
Like mental illness, like depression.
Like you're just talking about it, but you're not taking the time to educate.
Not even that. I'm talking about like people, like the news labeling someone with mental illness without actually even assessing them to even say, oh yes, they actually have mental illness, other than them just being actually sad, you know, because people are just like, life is hard.
Some people are just sad.
Yeah, some people are just sad. Everybody doesn't always have a mental illness. Like
there's such thing as functional depression.
True. Nah, I mean,
you know what I mean?
I know what you mean, but I don't know the extent of the exact situation. Like when it comes to mass shootings, I don't really follow it. Like I think that there's enough like bad in the world to where consistently feeding into that bad kind of just like puts a cloud of paranoia over you that you don't necessarily need at that given moment. Like there's enough paranoia in my life as far as like, what am I going to do tomorrow as far as career wise or family wise. I feel like adding in that extra fear is just hindering, you know, because if it happens, like, yeah, it happens. There's nothing you can do to prevent it. Like there can be armed bystanders wherever, but the timing in which you're at and the location and where you're at always determines like what happens to who.
I'm just trying to make sure I understand the line between a person that has a mental illness and a person that's just basically just crazy. You know what I mean? Because I don't want you to be like, oh yeah, he had a mental illness. No, he's just crazy. Don't give him an excuse.
So
like
it's used as a cop out.
Yeah, it could be used as a cop out too.
It could be used as a cop out.
Like I mean, every life like this is American society. Life is hard, but what about the person that was? Is it really something mentally that a person, because the person that was homeless had a rough life, didn't go and start shooting up somebody, rather than the other person who was just abused by his parents or something like that? You know what I mean? So that's how I'm looking at it as.
Do you think though that mental illness has, you know, developed the connotation that it has today because it's always focused on depression and anxiety rather than, you know,
there's a multitude of conditions.
Yeah.
So just those main two.
I understand that like there's a multitude, but it seems like mental illness now is just specifically linked to depression and anxiety rather than the other spectrum.
Well, I think it's because, how I'm looking at it is because I'm thinking if you think of other things like schizophrenia and stuff like that. Okay, I'm thinking schizophrenia is better dealt with as far as you give him pills then, because I know somebody that's schizophrenic. My dad is schizophrenic, so, but you give him pills, he's basically like normal as far as, but it's, of course you're talking about like PTSD, but depression is not exactly the same. You can take antidepressants, but are you going to be, hey, I'm good now? Like, it's not the same thing. I mean, so that's what I mean. But okay. But what do you think is the if it's not video games, what do you think is the cause exactly? Because I know you kind of said mental illness, but you said not really.
It's a number of factors.
Factors.
Like you said, like you addressed, it's a double-edged sword. Like you said, the access and then also the condition. So I think that we're doing everything except for addressing the primary cause. So, for example, Wal-Mart, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but just recently they issued an internal memo about removing violent displays like video games and stuff like that, and then also taking down like the sportsman videos in the sporting goods section, like with the guns, so like you shooting deer, hunting videos. They took down those, but Walmart, they still sell firearms. So they
I was about to say they sell like rifles and everything.
But then I also looked into their policies about how they handle incidents in the past. So like in the 1990s, they stopped selling handguns. Then they also raised the age, I believe in 2018, you have to be 21 to buy any firearms or any related things in Walmart. So it's not like they're just targeting like the video game industry specifically, but I do feel like this was a foolish reaction just to eliminate those displays. For example, like Call of Duty and Resident Evil, like all these big franchises that, yeah, they're violent video games.
Is it really foolish if they're trying to save profit and not trying to lose profit?
Is it really foolish?
Yeah. You say it's foolish that they're actually doing that, but they're changing it because perception is that, oh, guns are more bad. So if I see that,
Is it really right to change because of perception?
In a business aspect, maybe.
I understand it might be a sound business choice, but as far as like doing the right thing, like for example, when you do that, you set the precedent.
Do you really think Walmart is thinking about doing the right thing, or you think?
Ask me a question.
Yeah, I'm asking you another one.
Ask me a question.
I'm asking another one. You really think Walmart is doing the right thing? They worried about doing the right thing, or they just worried about perception of how people look at it?
That's the way things are. But I feel like I think that's a foolish thing to do.
No, okay.
Like you should be more concerned about
morality-wise. It's a foolish thing to do.
Sure. You should be more concerned about thinking things through and the implications, because like by you just making that move, then you automatically, I guess, validate someone else's opinion on the fact that the video games are partially to blame. So it's like a cascading effect. Then it's so easy to scapegoat that, and we're still not addressing the main issue. What happens when we take all the video games away? Like, and there's still shootings. What happens? What's the issue now? We'll find something else to blame, but we won't like actually address the issue. We're putting band-aids over a gunshot wound.
Yeah, I believe that music and television, or cinema, to be exactly, has more influence than video games on a person. You don't think so?
I think their upbringing has the biggest influence.
I said bigger influence, not the biggest.
No, like I know, but I just. Maybe it's just because in my mind
you never been affected by a television show or music.
Like, I mean, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I've watched.
Didn't make you want to go.
Nah, like I've watched Paid in Full like over like 100 times.
But your life is, of course, different from other people.
No, what I'm saying.
But you're saying upbringing, like you said. You said upbringing.
That's why I said upbringing.
How your upbringing? You had a dad that was in the military who was stern and stuff like that.
I mean, that didn't mean shit because I still smoked weed, but I never like thought to sell.
That's not as bad as other.
You gotta start other ways.
It's still deviant behavior.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Like I've watched Paid in Full hella times. Like watching Ace come up from the cleaners to pushing the Benzes and the Beamers like that.
Excuse me, I'm not black enough, but I haven't really watched Paid in Full. Is this?
It's a drug dealing movie. It has like what's the dude's name?
Mackay Fiver.
Yeah, it has him and Cameron in it.
Yeah, I know he's in it.
It's just like watching it over and over again. I think it is possible for multiple messages to come from that. Just like you're saying, like you think it has like some influence in it. For me, what I took from Paid in Full was like to get money. That's all I took it from. I didn't think like, oh, I can get money from selling drugs. It's like I just gotta get money by any means.
People interpret it differently.
Yeah. So like I've watched Paid in Full, smoked a lot of weed while I was watching Paid in Full. Never thought that selling weed was how I was gonna make my money. Never thought that selling Vyvanse or Adderall would be how I made my money. It was just stuff I was doing at the time, and it's just like almost like Scarface. It was like I love the era, and I love like everything about it, but it's something that I would never preach or want to be a part of. So what I think is like why I say upbringing is because there are still parents that feel the way they do about black people and Native Americans and Mexicans. And you're not born racist. You aren't born with racist tendencies. You learn it through what you see your parents do. So if you see your parents do something and then you turn around and you watch, your
parents in society too.
I'm not gonna say your parents, but you watch YouTube, for example, and you just so happen to come across a detailed documentary on like Hitler and why he thought the Aryan race was superior and why he thought Jews were inferior. So then you take what your parents have already taught you and you imply it in the same way that one of arguably, no defense of Hitler at all, but arguably one of like the greatest leaders for their specific country.
Unsubscribe.
what for his country, like, did for his people in particular, not, for humanity, but for his people, then you kind of take that, what you see and apply it to real life. like, I'm not gonna sit here and say that, and I'm not gonna say it because I don't educate myself on Donald Trump, but I'm not gonna say what he pushes is like racist or or anything like that. But he doesn't like categorically deny the speech at the same time. So I can't sit here and say like, oh, because you don't disassociate yourself or deny it, you're a part of that crowd. Like, it's not like he's sitting here saying like, and he has in a sense, called Mexicans rapists, this, that, and the third, and somebody could take that and use that as their motive. But it's not like a all military like might call to kill Mexicans or kill black people or anything like that. And he might be, mischievous enough and devious enough to display that message without really saying it, but then also at the same time he's not actually coming out and saying it. So what I'm saying is like, what you see in your upbringing essentially, it essentially like molds your conscious mind and your subconscious mind at the same time, to where like you just subconsciously begin to think racist thoughts. And when you're consciously speaking racist thoughts, it's just like an amplifying just what you really desire to be, which then pushes you to commit. This ain't no like case study or nothing like that. Like, that's just like me looking at what I've like loved during my early 20s and my late teens. I love drug dealer movies. I love listening to, rap music. I've never thought to, say fuck the police or anything like that. Like, I've had encounters with police that have been negative, but it's never been disrespectful. Like, at the end of the day, they got a gun. I don't. I ain't gonna say fuck you when you got a gun. I'm not gonna sit here and try and push the most weed at ODU because I know everybody's smoking, and it's just it's a cash cow at the end of the day. I know I'm gonna get paid. Like, I tie it to your upbringing, because I feel like hurt individuals do procreate and create even more hurt seeds.
I know, I agree. I
see what you were talking about, how like upbringing had the largest role into it.
Yeah.
I agree, because so what you do when you have a son, so you know exactly, you have to be very intentional about children, because what you're doing is you're programming a human being, and so by doing that you're giving them their framework to interpret the world. Mm-hmm. So if you give them that negative framework, of course that's what they funnel out. Yeah, it's like when they put the blinders on a horse and all you can see is like straight ahead. That's the exact same effect.
Yeah. And some parents, some kids aren't blessed to have parents that balance each other out. Some kids are born with parents that whose parents amplify each other's negative behaviors. Like, think about like domestic violence and all that. It doesn't just come out as domestic violence. There's series of events, series of neglect that lead to domestic violence. Like, nobody gets in a relationship like, oh, I'm gonna beat this bitch's ass. Like, that's not what they're thinking. Or I'm gonna beat this woman's ass. Like, or she's not coming in a relationship and be like, oh, I'm ready to stab this nigga. Like, that's just logically doesn't make sense. That's not what love and relationship is built off of. That's two individuals that were hurt before they even got into a relationship, feeding off of that same negative energy that they both ultimately are consumed by, and not knowing how to fix themselves. Like, I'm not gonna lie, video games may play a part, and to like answer the question, I don't think it plays a part to the point to where people want to go out and kill, because video games are created based off of, like, if we're going to talk about Grand Theft Auto and like your Call of Duties, they're based off of real life scenarios. Like, it isn't like somebody you put these human beings in a lab and they dream up like the most fantasy thing, and now you got a World of Warcraft. Like, people, I don't think, and I could be wrong, people are playing World of Warcraft and then thinking like, oh, I want to go to the strip mall and shoot everybody. Like, that's some stuff you see in Call of Duty.
But you think even with Grand Theft Auto, there's an element of suspension of belief.
There is, but there's the same way with Tupac as well. Like, you remember how if you think back to Tupac in the 90s, and how there was that thing where I think it was a C. Dolores Tucker that was trying to say that Tupac's music was directly related to a black person killing a police officer or shooting a police officer. Well, there's something like that in the 90s, to where like, and not even to like try and confuse you with something that it's not firsthand knowledge, but in the 90s, obviously, real big on police brutality. Mm-hmm. And in the 90s and late 80s, you had NWA, like Fuck the Police, and you had Tupac. Not necessarily, I mean, it's Fuck the Police, but it's Fuck the Police because of what they do to black people. And then you had this I think it was this black kid, killed the police officer and said that Tupac's music inspired him to do it. There's millions of other people listening to Tupac's music, and your mind frame or your conscience isn't focused on, oh, I gotta go shoot a black person because of, or go shoot a police officer because of what they did to somebody. Like, that's just not how, your conscious mind works. So, to bring it into video games, like, and what was your specific question again, so I can answer that one without drowning it out by the Tupac thing?
The question, like
you had a rebuttal. No, you had a rebuttal to what I said.
No, I said that even video games, like, they have an element of disbelief.
Oh, okay, yeah,
Like,
so my bad. I thought you took it as like.
No,
it
wasn't a question.
Okay.
I wasn't. Nah.
Yeah.
It's like, but you're detached from it.
Yeah, true.
Like, you don't feel like you're actually in the realm. Like, there's a differentiation between the real world and the video game. Like, even when you watch a violent, like Scarface, for example, you can tell it's different, and that's like an accuracy. It's a real person. You're in the same physical dimension as them, but you can understand and differentiate that that's not real.
Right.
Yeah. I had notoriety, cinema, privilege, mental health, and parenting as my.
I would put parenting as like the number one.
No, I would just.
Just random order.
Yeah, just random order. But I was like, parenting is number one after I actually wrote it. I was like, oh, parenting actually is definitely, because I'm in ABA, so
Don't get me wrong, like, you can have some great parents and then you could just have some like bad kids, but for the most part, it's bad parents producing bad kids.
Like, you have to be an outlier to just like
be
the opposite way around, I feel like.
Okay. But anything else you guys want to talk about as far as this topic? And we send our condolences to everybody, to all the victims in Dayton, Ohio, and El Paso. I was like, Dayton.
All the previous ones as well, if you want to.
True. Too many to name.
Nevada, even dating back to, what was one that occurred in Obama?
Or
Orlando too, but the one like where it was like the shooting at the school. It was like Sandy Hook.
Oh, Sandy Hook.
Yeah,
that's what it was. Sandy Hook. Yeah. I forgot about that. That was crazy.
It happens so often that you just.
It's like 200 and something this year, isn't it?
More mass shootings than there are days, from what I saw.
Oh yeah, that's good. That's wild. But yeah, what do you guys think of the topics we discussed though? Do you guys think video games are the cause? Let us know, okay? But we'll see you guys next time, okay? Peace.
Look, welcome to the show. Go and take a seat. Let's talk about the world while taking a sip of tea. A bunch of brothers come together. That's something we love to see. The company can't get no better. We come from running the streets, but we here now. The vibes all good. We survive. We gon' try and show the world inside the minds of some visionary brothers. We only got each other. We don't support each other. Ain't nobody gonna love us. We can talk about the violence, the silence, the Mayans, the state that the minds and the science, defiance, living and dying and laughing and crying, pure bliss and heartache and quitting and trying. That's real from the heart, truth in the heart. To come up in the future, we just gotta play our part. Can we handle that? Let them tear us apart. Infusion breakdown show. Go and talk about your thought.